all of my cameras. This is a video that I've been wanting to make for a very long time now. I'm going to go over all the cameras I have and why I've got each one. So let's dive in. First up is the Canon 60D. This camera was my first DSLR that I ever got, and the reason that I got it was because a YouTuber by the name of Ty Moss was doing an unboxing video of it on his channel, and I was like, well, this guy's a cool guy with cool technology, and I want to be a cool guy with cool technology. So I got the camera and I literally knew nothing about it other than the fact that he had it. And at the time I was kind of going from middle school into high school, and I was involved in a lot of photography classes. And so I figured, well, I guess this will work for that. And I started shooting more and more skate photos of my friends. I was playing around with the settings. I really didn't know much. I had some friends showing me some stuff. And then I started to realize that there were some cool video features in here. So I started shooting some stuff kind of on the beaches, some stuff on vacation with it. And I started to get more familiar with video, only to realize that this was a crop sensor. And so I was like, I need to upgrade. So I waited a few years later till I started to learn more settings, and this next camera I'm going to talk about is the one that I upgraded to. The Canon 6D. Not to be confused with the 60D. This camera I got after doing a bunch of research on Google and YouTube, and I even went on Flickr, and I started to look at photos that people were putting out with the 6D on Flickr, and I was like, wow, the colors on here are so nice, and wow, this is like so sharp. And I realized that this was full frame, so there was a lot more of the frame for me to work with, and I was like, well, I guess this is the camera I'm gonna get. I was still shooting photo at the time. I realized that this camera did video too, but there was one downside to the video with this camera, and it was the fact that there was no flip out screen. However, that did not stop me from shooting video. I started to shoot more music videos of my friends just kind of around town. Started to shoot more skate videos on it, but anything I shot, it was always like this. I could never be in any other position because I couldn't see what I was shooting. And I really loved how everything turned out on it. And at the time, like I said, I was still into photography, and this is where I started to shoot more film. So I'll talk about this film camera that I got. Next up is the Nikon Nikormat. So as I mentioned, I was into photography at the time, and I had seen a few photos on Flickr that this camera had shot, and coincidentally, a friend of mine texted me that same week and was like, hey man, I'm out in California right now and I see this Nikormat for this price. Do you want me to get one for you and then pay me back? And I was like, yeah, of course, because the price was too good to beat. So he got that camera, and I began to shoot more stuff on vacation with this thing, more photos just around town for fun, more portraits. And this is really where I started to learn camera settings and the importance of really nailing settings down, because obviously you only had 24 or 32 exposures, and once you were out of those, you had to pay for more film. So I was like, I gotta take my time with this and really kind of nail these settings down while I can. And I started to experiment more and learn kind of things like double exposure. And so this was kind of like my camera. I was learning how to experiment with settings more than anything else. And that was where I decided to kind of dive into other cameras. So I'm gonna talk about the next camera that I got, the Fujifilm X100. This is the camera that people stop me in public and go, hey man, I used to have that camera back in my day. And I'm like, no, you didn't. It's because it looks so much like an old 35mm camera that people think it's 35mm. But that was why I got this camera, because I was on Flickr at the time and I started to see a bunch of images that looked like stuff that was coming out of my Nikormat and stuff that was coming out of my friends' vintage cameras. And I was like, wow, that's all in this one camera? Why would I not just get this? And it has all these film modes in it that I really like, and it takes just some of the sharpest images. And to this day, I still bring this camera with me if I'm on vacation or if I just go somewhere for fun. I always throw this camera with me. It's nice and light, throw it in your bag, good to shoot. And it has some modes in it where you can just shoot and go, or you can set up the settings exactly how you want it. It even has a flash on it. So I absolutely love this camera, and to this day would still recommend the Fujifilm X100 to anyone that's looking for a quick like grab and go camera. But let's talk about the next camera that I got, the Sony Vx1000. I have to give a quick shout out to my professor Mark at Columbia, who so graciously handed his camera over to me, because this is the kind of international skate camera. Those of you that skate, you've seen this camera, you know what I'm talking about. But if you don't skate, majority of skate videos are filmed on these, and now there's a big discussion of VX versus HD. This thing shoots on mini DV tapes, and it produces a 640 by 480 image. So it shows up square on the screen. It's kind of got that old school look to it. I'd say about 50% of skate videos to this day are still filmed on this thing. So I've always kind of had a soft spot for this camera. The downside of this camera is the more you use it, the more the heads inside of it get used, and then you have to send these things in, get them repaired. So you're kind of constantly getting these things repaired. Although I've not had to get this one repaired yet. This one has been holding up ever since Mark handed it off to me, and I'm glad he did, because the one that I had before this was Japanese, and I was so glad to finally have one that I could actually read the menus with. And so to this day, I'll still take this camera out, film my friend skating. I have another lens for it, and hey, I mean, if anyone ever wants to film a different style looking video on it, let me know. It's here, I have tape. So next up is the Canon EOS R. I got this camera after doing a bunch of research on YouTube and looking some stuff up on Google to realize that this camera shot 4K and that it also shoots 1920 by 1080 60 frames per second. So I was able to get a lot of those slow-mo shots that people want, and it has a digital stabilization mode built into it, which was already like 3 times the amount of features that my 60D or 60 ever had. And I also loved how this had a flip out screen, so I was like, wow, on top of using it for client shoots, I can use this camera to film like YouTube videos on, or anything else, just for my own personal good too. As soon as I saw everything with this, I was like, I'm just gonna get this camera. And I actually ended up using this camera for a few years. There's some promo videos you've seen on my Instagram that have been shot with this. There's been a lot of shoots that you see now that are still used with this, where I'll set this up as a B camera, or I'll even set this up as a wide shot on 4K. So this camera has been very useful for me, and this is the camera that I continue to use. So let's dive in and talk about the next camera that I got. Next up is the Canon C100. This was my first cinema camera purchase, and I got this camera after seeing my friend shoot a bunch of Sofars on it, and I really loved how the quality on his camera turned out. And I started to do more research on my own before buying it, and I really liked the features that it offered and the overall quality that it offered, and I really liked the overall weight of it too. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get one and see how this goes. And I ended up using it for Sofars. I ended up using it to shoot more shows, and this camera kind of got me off the ground with filming live music. And I ended up liking this camera so much that I bought a second one so that I could set one up as a wide shot and then set one up as a main camera to film shows with. And as I started to use this camera more, I realized that there were more features that I could play with on it. I really liked the flip out screen that it had, and I really liked how you could plug XLRs in right here. I thought that was really cool. After using it for quite a while, I realized that, hey, you know what? I'm seeing some stuff on the internet that looks really good, and these cameras can't quite do it, and I was really bummed out. And so I started to do more research, and that was where I got this next camera. The current camera that I have now, the Sony FX6. This thing has been my favorite camera ever. This thing offers every single feature I could ever think of in a camera, between shooting 4K RAW internally, between being able to shoot 120 frames per second at 4K, getting those super slow motion shots, between being able to use settings that I can use any colors I want, the weight of it. And I was like, wow, I have a gimbal, so I'll be able to mount this thing on that. And I loved the monitor that this thing has right here. I also love how the low light shots turned out on this camera, and they were super clean. And I realized they had a feature called dual native ISO, which is the thing that lets you shoot in super high ISOs before you see grain. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, usually on most cameras, once you hit about 1600 and you go up, you start seeing grain. This camera, you can go all the way up to 120,000 before you start seeing grain. And I thought that was super cool. And that was a feature that was very important to me on this camera. There's even some features in here that I, to this day, still have to learn. But this camera is responsible for everything that I've shot in probably the last 8 months. Weddings, music videos, events, interviews, really anything at all. And this thing is my favorite camera I have ever bought. But as far as what I shoot right now, this thing covers it all. And I cannot stress how much I love this camera. That has been all of my cameras. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know, leave a comment, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.